The United States government has outlawed my X-Men, but this school will forever remain a sanctuary.
I know we've been a little busy grappling with the more significant details of the 6th episode of Season 2 of X-Men 97, Danger.Exe. I mean, you got a crisis of the highest order in danger, and then the episode ends with Apocalypse resurrecting Gambit as his new Horseman of Death. However, there is a brief moment that introduces some very interesting cameos in the episode, and I found it significant because it stays true to the core theme of X-Men. For as long as I can remember, the X-Men universe has always been about finding a safe spot for the marginalized, and in this episode, it's heartening to see a whole lot of mutant kids getting admission to Xavier's school. They're going to be trained by the best, as Storm is their new head mistress, and this is going to be a sanctuary for them to master their skills and ethical boundaries. I've looked pretty closely at that gathering of young mutants, and some of them are the Generation.X mutants whom Jubilee broke out earlier, but there are some new ones mixed in as well, and in this video, we're going to be exploring every single one of these new mutant students. There's some deep cuts in there, so it's going to be a great video, and I'm looking forward to it. Let's just get into it already. Wing! Of all the new mutants shown here, Wing probably has the most significant backstory, and the comic book version is rather tragic. In the episode, Wing is the young mutant who's fatally injured by the Danger Room, but is revived. In the comics, however, he's not so lucky. In fact, things are significantly more twisted because the sentient Danger Room manipulates him into committing suicide. This is how the Danger Room breaks one of its most fundamental programming directives, and the physical entity named Danger is formed. But before this terrible turn of fate, Wing was a promising young mutant named Edward Tancred, who was almost too enthusiastic about his powers. When they first manifested, he was so thrilled that he broke both his legs during a landing. He wanted to be one of the X-Men, and he joined the Xavier Institute as a student. This is when he adapted the codename Wing, and he was mentored by Kitty Pryde, alongside the likes of Armor and Blindfold, and Armor even became his best friend at the Institute. When Ord from Breakworld infiltrated the Xavier Institute, the X-Men weren't there. But Ord captured Wing and injected him with a cure for mutant abilities. As a result, he was no longer able to fly, which, if you haven't guessed already from his name, was his mutant power. He was extremely depressed, but he stayed at the Xavier Institute and spent a lot of time in the Danger Room. Danger, disguised as Armor, made him think he was flying and tricked him into leaping off a cliff, and this despicable move is what changed Danger for the worse. It's a nice touch to bring Wing back for Danger's origin story, and this time with a happy ending. Chamber. You might have noticed the young man with the glowing face among the new mutant students, and this is none other than Chamber. He goes by the name Jono Starsmore, and his mutant ability was the generation and manipulation of concussive blasts of psionic energy from a furnace inside his chest. Additionally, he also has telepathic abilities and other psychic skills like mental manipulation. Like many other mutants, Jono had an unfortunate discovery about his mutant powers when a devastating explosion took place and injured his girlfriend. He was left with a furnace of psionic energy in his chest, and the blast destroyed much of his lower face. Without a mouth, Jono could no longer communicate verbally, and telepathy became his only mode of communication. That said, his life did get better after joining the Young Mutants team, Generation.X, and in spite of his disfigurement, he wasn't looked down upon. He was even romantically involved with a mutant named Husk. Jono also joined the X-Men later in life, but the unfortunate events of M-Day took away his mutant abilities. He discovered that he was a descendant of Apocalypse, and eventually he joined the New Warriors and adopted the identity of Decibel, wielding sonic powers. Eventually, Jono rejoined the X-Men, and his storyline continues in the ongoing X-Men comics run. Shark Girl. I don't know about you, but I think Shark Girl has one of the more hilarious mutations, and it was fun to see her in the latest episode. She was born Ayara dos Santos in a small town in Brazil, and she spent her childhood in this coastal town, but soon she started to develop an unusual craving for fresh fish. As she grew, that craving became so overwhelming that she started to undergo a bodily transformation. Her human form changed into a terrifying wereshark, and she developed some new mutant powers alongside this. Among the mutant community, Angel and Mystique recruited her for their respective causes, and Ayara was unsure about joining the mutants. Eventually, Mystique grew impatient and wanted to use force with her, but Angel ferried her away to safety and admitted her into the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. Here, Iota found some purpose, and she felt a sense of belonging as she split her time between her school and her homeland. One of her more remarkable adventures was when Wolverine took her and some other students to the Savage Land to teach them to work together. Nothing inspires cooperation like dinosaurs. Shark Girl eventually became a citizen of Krakoa's mutant nation, and after its fall, she was a part of Dazzler's band, where she had to wear an image inducer to look human. One of her key powers, which you can imagine from her name, is transforming into a shark, and she can retain her human consciousness during this time. She can survive indefinitely underwater or on land, and she gained superhuman strength and speed courtesy of her mutation. She also has a rapid regenerative healing factor, and she can telepathically control other sea creatures. It's a long shot, but I'm really hoping the show finds a way to utilize her powers in later episodes. Dust. So many young mutants come from humble origins, and Dust, aka Suraya Kadir, is one of them. She was born in Afghanistan and kidnapped as a child to be sold into slavery. Wolverine and Phantom X rescued her after a few years, and she was sent to the Indian X Corporation base in Mumbai. However, she did her best to hide herself from the X-Men there by turning into sand and remaining scattered around the complex. It was Phoenix who sensed her presence and convinced her telepathically to reveal herself to everyone. Finally, Suraya announced her presence and became a part of Xavier's Institute in Westchester County, New York. When Zorn forced her to embrace his vision of a world dominated by mutants, she refused to be radicalized and tried to alert Xavier, but Zorn was manipulative enough to convince the professor that she was out of control. Turns out that was actually Magneto disguised as Zorn, but that's a story for another day. With time, the school was rebuilt and Dust got a new roommate with Surge. She had some trouble adjusting yet again because of her rivalry with Surge, but there was an amazing story arc where Suraya got to reunite with her mother, even though it wasn't a permanent change. After the events of M-Day, where almost 90% of the mutant population lost their powers, Dust was one of the few who remained, and she was merged into a large group with X-23 as her new roommate. She became a target for Reverend William Stryker during this time, and in an intriguing storyline, she fights and defeats his group, the Purifiers. There are many other stories featuring Dust in the comics, but what excites us the most about her is her powers. She can transform into a destructive sandblast by transforming the substance of her body into loose silicon particles and creating an explosive release. She can move as a sandstorm and enter people's lungs or break through steel. She's extremely durable, resistant to telepathy and magic, and I think she has the potential to be one of the most significant upcoming mutants. No Girl. No Girl, or Martha Johansson, was a teenage mutant runaway, and she was captured by a human supremacist group called the U-Men. The group's founder, John Sublime, had her brain removed and kept her disembodied brain alive in a capsule. He controlled her through drugs and used her to get back at his opponents. Eventually, Cyclops and Emma Frost freed her and gave her her freedom, and she got her revenge on Sublime by causing him to fall to his death. She was enrolled in the Xavier Institute and became a member of Zorn's special class. One of her fellow students, Quentin Quire, who's also a part of the new X-Men 97 episode, invented a special hovering case that held her brain, and that's how we see her in the episode as well. However, unlike Dust, who didn't join Zorn's extremist mission, No Girl became a part of his team. She only returned to the Xavier Institute after the death of Zorn. Much like Dust, No Girl has been a very important mutant in recent times, and she's featured in numerous comic book storylines. As for her mutant abilities, she's actually a powerful telepath, and her powers are quite advanced. She can broadcast disruptive psionic signals in her vicinity and cloud the minds of her victims. She can also possess her victim's consciousness while her mind is in command, and this allows her to take control of their body. Perhaps the most unique part of her telepathic abilities is that she can use them to dig into the cerebral cortex of the dead and operate their bodies temporarily by using their neurons. Perhaps the most difficult part of No Girl's life is that, as a dismembered brain, she needs regular injections of medical fluids to keep her alive. Dupe. Among all the strange-looking New Mutant students, Dupe might stand out the most because of his unique appearance. Not much is known about his origins, but Captain America once revealed that Dupe was created by the US government in a secret project during the Cold War. He speaks an alien language, and it's said that he had a major role in the fall of communism in the Eastern Bloc. Dupe has a mother named Mama Dupe, but he shares a strained bond with her. He wasn't a primary character initially, and he only joined the mutant team X-Force as their official videographer. transfer. When most of X-Force died, Dupe became a popular member. There's a funny incident in the comics where Dupe's brain exploded and his teammates had to find the scattered parts and rebuild him again. He had to fight Thor in order to get the final part of his primary brain, and all of this amounted to a tragic death by bullets during one of his missions. But Dupe wasn't really dead, and Polaris discovered him in space. He later crashed in Costa Rica, and while he was still alive, he was deformed and acted like a child. It's been suggested that Dupe comes from a place called Marginalia, which is a world between worlds, or perhaps a world between comic panels. His powers are quite diverse, and they've been shown to be magical, psionic, or even cosmic in nature. He has a genius-level intellect, and his mental powers are insane. He holds a ton of knowledge, and he can levitate and fly around if required. Most importantly, though, he can change his size and shape at will, and his healing ability is also off the charts. As for brute physical strength, well, he can fight Thor, so you can just imagine what this little guy can do. With other abilities like traveling across dimensions and emitting energy blasts, Dupe is probably one of the strongest mutants among the new batch that was introduced in Danger.Exe. Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega. Surely you noticed Quentin Quire in the episode wearing the Magneto Was Right t-shirt. Well, that t-shirt comes straight from the comics, and Quire has always been pretty vocal about his support for Magneto and his extreme ways in the aftermath of Genosha. He joined the student body of the Xavier Institute and immediately stood out as a brilliant intellectual. He soon became one of Xavier's prized pupils, and he became one of the most powerful telepaths at the mansion. As I already mentioned, he was the one to develop the anti-gravity float for Martha Johansson's brain canister, but what Quentin Quire is best known for is his rebellious side. He often debated with the professor about the merits of the school's policies, so you can understand the significance of the t-shirt he wears in this episode. In fact, he was in outright rebellion with Xavier's policies at one point and declared an all-out war on humans. Kid Omega has been a part of far too many crucial storylines, and he's probably the most familiar face among the lot, especially for those who are comic book enthusiasts. His powers are mostly his strong telepathic abilities, but there was also the time he was the avatar of the Phoenix Force. He can also track other sentient beings via their psionic emanations, and his mental manipulation game is on point. I love how Kid Omega can hide his presence from others using a telepathic cloak, and his mind control and illusions are as powerful as anyone else in the X-Men universe. In fact, he's been classified as an Omega-level mutant, which means that his powers have no upper limit, and I really hope the show has a bigger role for him as the X-Men prepare for the apocalypse threat. Eye-Boy. He goes by the name Trevor Hawkins, and he's among the new mutants who manifested their powers after the war between the Avengers and the X-Men. He was a part of the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, and he had to study there because he was teased and bullied in regular school. Do you remember what I mentioned about Wolverine organizing a trip to the Savage Land for his students to understand the importance of teamwork? Well, Trevor, aka Eye-Boy, was a part of this group, and he soon established himself as a pretty important mutant. In fact, when Mojo captured him in the Mojoverse, Trevor developed some new abilities for his eyes because of the experiments conducted on him. He later became a part of Jubilee's team, which also included the likes of Quentin Quire, Benjamin Deeds, and Nathaniel Carver. His most eventful story arc is one where he seemingly died, but don't worry, this is comic books, he came back. Eye-Boy has a pretty unique power in that he's covered in multiple eyes, 57 of them, which allow him to see in multiple directions. After his upgrade from Mojo, his eyes actually started doing stuff. He now has telepathic vision, X-ray vision, and night vision as a part of his diverse visual abilities. Rockslide. Santo Vaccaro was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and he was a strong and powerful child, and his parents raised him to believe that only the strong are respected in the world. He bullied the other kids to establish himself as the strongest, and he was part of wrestling and football teams. Finally, when his mutant abilities manifested, his body transformed into a rock, and he became even bigger and stronger. While most mutants find rejection from their parents, Santos's parents did no such thing. Even though he was treated like a freak by others, his parents loved his powerful new form. He went off to the Xavier Institute, and that's where he got the name Rockslide. He's endured a lot, and even in the aftermath of M-Day, Rockslide was one of the few mutants to not lose their powers. This guy always reminds me of the Thing from the Fantastic Four, and his powers are somewhat similar. Aside from his physical prowess, Rockslide can rebuild himself and has some explosive powers as well. As a member of the New Mutants, he's involved with several ongoing stories, but it was nice to see an animated series cameo for Rockslide as well. Monet. I think Monet St. Croix, usually called M, is one of Marvel's most gifted and complicated mutants. She's a wealthy, highly intelligent X-Men associate who first rose to prominence with Generation X, and she became known for her sharp personality, confidence, and near-perfect mutant abilities. Monet has superhuman physical traits like strength, speed, reflexes, durability, healing, and enhanced senses, along with flight, telepathy, and telekinesis. Her story is perhaps most famous for its identity twists. She was once trapped in the body of Penance, and for a time, that form became one of the most visually striking and tragic parts of her history. What makes Monet stand out is that she's not just powerful, she's also proud, strategic, and often socially abrasive, which gives her a very distinct voice in X-Men stories. In short, Monet is a classic example of a mutant who combines raw power with big personality and a heavily layered backstory. Synch. Synch, whose real name is Everett Thomas, is a major X-Men mutant known for his unique ability to copy the powers of nearby superhumans through his synchronistic aura. He first came onto the scene with Generation X and quickly stood out because his power isn't just mimicry in the ordinary sense. It lets him sync with another mutant's energy signature and use their abilities, sometimes in more flexible or amplified ways. Over time, his story has become much bigger than just a cool power set because Synch has been through trauma, sacrifice, death, and resurrection, which made him one of the most important newer generation mutants. Thanks to some time manipulation shenanigans, Synch actually spent centuries battling for his life inside the Vault, where he fell in love with Laura Kinney, the new Wolverine. Synch sadly died in the Vault, but he was resurrected in Krakoa with those memories intact. This led to a significant power boost, and some have suggested he might even be an Omega-level mutant. I can promise you we're going to be seeing more of this mutant in the years to come. We know that most of these guys won't be around for the long run, and in fact, we probably saw the last of most of them in this episode. However, it was an interesting choice to put them all together as the new students in Xavier's school, and it just shows how serious the makers are about considering key characters from the extensive X-Men comic universe. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What was your favorite cameo, and which character do you want to see more from in the future? Also, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more stuff like it, the best way is to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more such videos. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one.